God sees the truth, but waits. A short story by Leo Tolstoy. In the town of Vladimir lived a young merchant named Ivan Dmitrik Aksionov. He had 2 shops and a house of his own. Aksionov was a handsome, fair-haired, curly-headed fellow, full of fun and very fond of singing. When quite a young man, he had been given to drink and was riotous when he had had too much. But after he married, he gave up drinking, except now and then. One summer, Aksionov was going to the Nizhny Fair, and as he bade goodbye to his family, his wife said to him, "Ivan Dmitrik, do not start today. I have had a bad dream about you." Aksionov laughed and said, "You are afraid that when I get to the fair, I shall go on a spree." His wife replied, "I do not know what I'm afraid of. All I know is that I had a bad dream. I dreamt you returned from the town, and when you took off your cap, I saw that your hair was quite grey." Aksionov laughed. "That's a lucky sign," said he. "See if I don't sell out all my goods and bring you some presents from the fair." So he said goodbye to his family and drove away. When he had travelled halfway, he met a merchant whom he knew, and they put up at the same inn for the night. They had some tea together and then went to bed in adjoining rooms. It was not Aksionov's habit to sleep late, and wishing to travel while it was still cool, he aroused his driver before dawn and told him to put in the horses. Then he made his way across to the landlord of the inn, who lived in a cottage at the back, paid his bill, and continued his journey. When he had gone about 25 miles, he stopped for the horses to be fed. Aksionov rested a while in the passage of the inn, then he stepped out into the porch and, ordering a samovar to be heated, got out his guitar and began to play. Suddenly, a troika drove up with tinkling bells and an official alighted, followed by 2 soldiers. He came to Aksionov and began to question him, asking him who he was and whence he came. Aksionov answered him fully and said, "Won't you have some tea with me?" But the official went on cross-questioning him and asking him, "Where did you spend last night? Were you alone or with a fellow merchant? Did you see the other merchant this morning? Why did you leave the inn before dawn?" Aksionov wondered why he was asked all these questions, but he described all that had happened, and then added, "Why do you cross-question me as if I were a thief or a robber? I am travelling on business of my own, and there is no need to question me." Then the official, calling the soldiers, said, "I am the police officer of this district, and I question you because the merchant with whom you spent last night has been found with his throat cut. We must search your things." They entered the house. The soldiers and the police officer unstrapped Aksionov's luggage and searched it. Suddenly, the officer drew a knife out of a bag, crying, "Whose knife is this?" Aksionov looked, and seeing a blood-stained knife taken from his bag, he was frightened. "How is it there is blood on this knife?" Aksionov tried to answer, but could hardly utter a word, and only stammered, "I don't know, not mine." Then the police officer said, "This morning the merchant was found in bed with his throat cut. You are the only person who could have done it. The house was locked from inside, and no one else was there. Here is this blood-stained knife in your bag, and your face and manner betray you. Tell me how you killed him, and how much money you stole." Aksionov swore he had not done it, that he had not seen the merchant after they had had tea together, that he had no money except 8,000 rubles of his own, and that the knife was not his. But his voice was broken, his face pale, and he trembled with fear as though he went guilty. The police officer ordered the soldiers to bind Aksionov and to put him in the cart. As they tied his feet together and flung him into the cart, Aksionov crossed himself and wept. His money and goods were taken from him, and he was sent to the nearest town and imprisoned there. Inquiries as to his character were made in Vladimir. The merchants and other inhabitants of that town said that in former days he used to drink and waste his time, but that he was a good man. Then the trial came on. He was charged with murdering a merchant from Ryazan and robbing him of 20,000 rubles. His wife was in despair and did not know what to believe. Her children were all quite small. One was a baby at her breast. Taking them all with her, she went to the town where her husband was in jail. At first, she was not allowed to see him, but after much begging, she obtained permission from the officials and was taken to him. When she saw her husband in prison dress and in chains, shut up with thieves and criminals, she fell down and did not come to her senses for a long time. Then she drew her children to her and sat down near him. She told him of things at home and asked about what had happened to him. He told her all, and she asked, "What can we do now?" "We must petition the Tsar not to let an innocent man perish." His wife told him that she had sent a petition to the Tsar, but it had not been accepted. Aksionov did not reply, but only looked downcast. Then his wife said, "It was not for nothing I dreamt your hair had turned grey. You remember? You should not have started that day." And passing her fingers through his hair, she said, "Vanya, dearest, tell your wife the truth. Was it not you who did it?" "So you, too, suspect me," said Aksionov, and hiding his face in his hands, he began to weep. Then a soldier came to say that the wife and children must go away, and Aksionov said goodbye to his family for the last time. When they were gone, Aksionov recalled what had been said, and when he remembered that his wife also had suspected him, he said to himself, "It seems that only God can know the truth. It is to him alone we must appeal, and from him alone expect mercy." And Aksionov wrote no more petitions, gave up all hope, and only prayed to God. Aksionov was condemned to be flogged and sent to the mines. So he was flogged with a knot, and when the wounds made by the knot were healed, he was driven to Siberia with other convicts. For 26 years, Aksionov lived as a convict in Siberia. His hair turned white as snow, and his beard grew long, thin, and grey. All his mirth went. He stooped. He walked slowly, spoke little, and never laughed, but he often prayed. In prison, Aksionov learnt to make boots and earned a little money, with which he bought The Lives of the Saints. He read this book when there was light enough in the prison, and on Sundays in the prison church he read the lessons and sang in the choir, for his voice was still good. The prison authorities liked Aksionov for his meekness, and his fellow prisoners respected him. They called him Grandfather and the Saint. When they wanted to petition the prison authorities about anything, they always made Aksionov their spokesman, and when there were quarrels among the prisoners, they came to him to put things right and to judge the matter. No news reached Aksionov from his home, and he did not even know if his wife and children were still alive. One day, a fresh gang of convicts came to the prison. In the evening, the old prisoners collected round the new ones and asked them what towns or villages they came from and what they were sentenced for. Among the rest, Aksionov sat down near the newcomers and listened with downcast air to what was said. One of the new convicts, a tall, strong man of 60, with a closely cropped grey beard, was telling the others what he had been arrested for. "Well, friends," he said, "I only took a horse that was tied to a sledge, and I was arrested and accused of stealing. I said I'd only taken it to get home quicker and had then let it go. Besides, the driver was a personal friend of mine, so I said, 'It's all right.' 'No,' said they, 'you stole it.' But how or where I stole it, they could not say. I once really did something wrong, and ought by rights to have come here long ago, but that time I was not found out. Now I have been sent here for nothing at all. Hey, but it's lies I'm telling you. I've been to Siberia before, but I did not stay long." "Where are you from?" asked someone. "From Vladimir. My family are of that town. My name is Makar, and they also call me Semyonik." Aksionov raised his head and said, "Tell me, Semyonik, do you know anything of the merchants Aksionov of Vladimir? Are they still alive?" "Know them? Of course I do. The Aksionovs are rich, though their father is in Siberia, a sinner like ourselves, it seems. As for you, Grandad, how did you come here?" Aksionov did not like to speak of his misfortune. He only sighed and said, "For my sins I have been in prison these 26 years. "What sins?" asked Makar Semyonik. But Aksionov only said, Well, well, I must have deserved it. He would have said no more, but his companions told the newcomers how Aksionov came to be in Siberia, how someone had killed a merchant and had put the knife among Aksionov's things, and Aksionov had been unjustly condemned. When Makar Semyonik heard this, he looked at Aksionov, slapped his own knee, and exclaimed, "Well, this is wonderful, really wonderful. But how old you've grown, Grandad." The others asked him why he was so surprised and where he had seen Aksionov before, but Makar Semyonik did not reply. He only said, "It's wonderful that we should meet here, lads." These words made Aksionov wonder whether this man knew who had killed the merchant. So he said, "Perhaps, Semyonik, you have heard of that affair, or maybe you've seen me before." "How could I help hearing? The world's full of rumors, but it's a long time ago, and I've forgotten what I heard." "Perhaps you heard who killed the merchant?" asked Aksionov. Makar Semyonik laughed and replied, "It must have been him in whose bag the knife was found. If someone else hid the knife there, he's not a thief till he's caught. As the saying is, how could anyone put a knife into your bag while it was under your head? It would surely have woke you up." When Aksionov heard these words, he felt sure this was the man who had killed the merchant. He rose and went away. All that night, Aksionov lay awake. He felt terribly unhappy, and all sorts of images rose in his mind. There was the image of his wife as she was when he parted from her to go to the fair. He saw her as if she were present. Her face and her eyes rose before him. He heard her speak and laugh. Then he saw his children, quite little, as they were at that time, one with a little cloak on, another at his mother's breast. And then he remembered himself as he used to be young and merry. He remembered how he sat playing the guitar in the porch of the inn where he was arrested, and how free from care he had been. He saw, in his mind, the place where he was flogged, the executioner and the people standing around, the chains, the convicts, all the 26 years of his prison life, and his premature old age. The thought of it all made him so wretched that he was ready to kill himself. "And it's all that villain's doing," thought Aksionov, and his anger was so great against Makar Semyonik that he longed for vengeance, even if he himself should perish for it. He kept repeating prayers all night, but could get no peace. During the day, he did not go near Makar Semyonik, nor even look at him. A fortnight passed in this way. Aksionov could not sleep at night, and was so miserable that he did not know what to do. One night, as he was walking about the prison, he noticed some earth that came rolling out from under one of the shelves on which the prisoners slept. He stopped to see what it was. Suddenly, Makar Semyonik crept out from under the shelf and looked up at Aksionov with frightened face. Aksionov tried to pass without looking at him, but Makar seized his hand and told him that he had dug a hole under the wall, getting rid of the earth by putting it into his high boots and emptying it out every day on the road when the prisoners were driven to their work. "Just you keep quiet, old man, and you shall get out too. If you blab, they'll flog the life out of me, but I will kill you first." Aksionov trembled with anger as he looked at his enemy. He drew his hand away, saying, "I have no wish to escape, and you have no need to kill me. You killed me long ago. As to telling of you, I may do so or not, as God shall direct." Next day, when the convicts were led out to work, the convoy soldiers noticed that one or other of the prisoners emptied some earth out of his boots. The prison was searched, and the tunnel found. The governor came and questioned all the prisoners to find out who had dug the hole. They all denied any knowledge of it. Those who knew would not betray Makar Semyonik, knowing he would be flogged almost to death. At last, the governor turned to Aksionov, whom he knew to be a just man, and said, "You are a truthful old man. Tell me before God who dug the hole." Makar Semyonik stood as if he were quite unconcerned, looking at the governor and not so much as glancing at Aksionov. Aksionov's lips and hands trembled, and for a long time he could not utter a word. He thought, Why should I screen him who ruined my life? Let him pay for what I have suffered. But if I tell, they will probably flog the life out of him, and maybe I suspect him wrongly. And after all, what good would it be to me?" "Well, old man," repeated the governor, "tell me the truth. Who has been digging under the wall?" Aksionov glanced at Makar Semyonich and said, "I cannot say, Your Honor. It is not God's will that I should tell. Do what you like with me. I am in your hands." However much the governor tried, Aksionov would say no more, and so the matter had to be left. That night, when Aksionov was lying on his bed and just beginning to doze, someone came quietly and sat down on his bed. He peered through the darkness and recognized Makar. "What more do you want of me?" asked Aksionov. "Why have you come here?" Makar Semyonich was silent, so Aksionov sat up and said, "What do you want? Go away, or I will call the guard." Makar Semyonich bent close over Aksionov and whispered, "Ivan Dmitrich, forgive me." "What for?" asked Aksionov. "It was I who killed the merchant and hid the knife among your things. I meant to kill you too, but I heard a noise outside, so I hid the knife in your bag and escaped out of the window." Aksionov was silent and did not know what to say. Makar Semyonich slid off the bed shelf and knelt upon the ground. "Ivan Dmitrich," said he, "forgive me. For the love of God, forgive me. I will confess that it was I who killed the merchant, and you will be released and can go to your home." "It is easy for you to talk," said Aksionov, "but I have suffered for you these 26 years. Where could I go to now? My wife is dead, and my children have forgotten me. I have nowhere to go." Makar Semyonich did not rise, but beat his head on the floor. "Ivan Dmitrich, forgive me," he cried. "When they flogged me with the knot, it was not so hard to bear as it is to see you now. Yet you had pity on me, and did not tell. For Christ's sake, forgive me, wretch that I am." And he began to sob. When Aksionov heard him sobbing, he too began to weep. "God will forgive you," said he. "Maybe I am 100 times worse than you." And at these words, his heart grew light, and the longing for home left him. He no longer had any desire to leave the prison, but only hoped for his last hour to come. In spite of what Aksionov had said, Makar Semyonich confessed his guilt. But when the order for his release came, Aksionov was already dead.
The Candle, a short story by Leo Tolstoy. Ye have heard that it hath been said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say unto you, that ye resist not evil. St. Matthew verses 38-39. It was in the time of serfdom, many years before Alexander II's liberation of the 60 million serfs in 1862. In those days the people were ruled by different kinds of lords. There were not a few who, remembering God, treated their slaves in a humane manner, and not as beasts of burden, while there were others who were seldom known to perform a kind or generous action. But the most barbarous and tyrannical of all were those former serfs who arose from the dirt and became princes. It was this latter class who made life literally a burden to those who were unfortunate enough to come under their rule. Many of them had arisen from the ranks of the peasantry to become superintendents of noblemen's estates. The peasants were obliged to work for their master a certain number of days each week. There was plenty of land and water, and the soil was rich and fertile, while the meadows and forests were sufficient to supply the needs of both the peasants and their lord. There was a certain nobleman who had chosen a superintendent from the peasantry on one of his other estates. No sooner had the power to govern been vested in this newly made official than he began to practice the most outrageous cruelties upon the poor serfs who had been placed under his control. Although this man had a wife and 2 married daughters, and was making so much money that he could have lived happily without transgressing in any way against either God or man, yet he was filled with envy and jealousy and deeply sunk in sin. Michael Simeonovitch began his persecutions by compelling the peasants to perform more days of service on the estate every week than the laws obliged them to work. He established a brickyard, in which he forced the men and women to do excessive labour, selling the bricks for his own profit. On one occasion, the overworked serfs sent a delegation to Moscow to complain of their treatment to their lord, but they obtained no satisfaction. When the poor peasants returned disconsolate from the nobleman, their superintendent determined to have revenge for their boldness in going above him for redress, and their life and that of their fellow victims became worse than before. It happened that among the serfs there were some very treacherous people who would falsely accuse their fellows of wrongdoing and sow seeds of discord among the peasantry, whereupon Michael would become greatly enraged, while his poor subjects began to live in fear of their lives. When the superintendent passed through the village, the people would run and hide themselves as from a wild beast. Seeing thus the terror which he had struck to the hearts of the moujiks, Michael's treatment of them became still more vindictive, so that from overwork and ill usage the lot of the poor serfs was indeed a hard one. There was a time when it was possible for the peasants, when driven to despair, to devise means whereby they could rid themselves of an inhuman monster such as Simeonovitch, and so these unfortunate people began to consider whether something could not be done to relieve them of their intolerable yoke. They would hold little meetings in secret places to bewail their misery and to confer with one another as to which would be the best way to act. Now and then, the boldest of the gathering would rise and address his companions in this strain. How much longer can we tolerate such a villain to rule over us? Let us make an end of it at once, for it were better for us to perish than to suffer. It is surely not a sin to kill such a devil in human form. It happened once, before the Easter holidays, that one of these meetings was held in the woods, where Michael had sent the serfs to make a clearance for their master. At noon they assembled to eat their dinner and to hold a consultation. "Why can't we leave now?" said one. "Very soon we shall be reduced to nothing. Already we are almost worked to death, there being no rest, night or day, either for us or our poor women. If anything should be done in a way not exactly to please him, he will find fault and perhaps flog some of us to death, as was the case with poor Simeon, whom he killed not long ago. Only recently Anisim was tortured in irons till he died. We certainly cannot stand this much longer." "Yes," said another. "What is the use of waiting? Let us act at once. Michael will be here this evening, and will be certain to abuse us shamefully. Let us then thrust him from his horse, and with one blow of an axe give him what he deserves, and thus end our misery. We can then dig a big hole and bury him like a dog, and no one will know what became of him. Now, let us come to an agreement, to stand together as one man, and not to betray one another." The last speaker was Vasily Minayev, who, if possible, had more cause to complain of Michael's cruelty than any of his fellow serfs. The superintendent was in the habit of flogging him severely every week, and he took also Vasily's wife to serve him as cook. Accordingly, during the evening that followed this meeting in the woods, Michael arrived on the scene on horseback. He began at once to find fault with the manner in which the work had been done, and to complain because some lime trees had been cut down. "I told you not to cut down any lime trees," shouted the enraged superintendent. "Who did this thing? Tell me at once, or I shall flog every one of you." On investigation, a peasant named Sidor was pointed out as the guilty one. and his face was roundly slapped. Michael also severely punished Vasily because he had not done sufficient work, after which the master rode safely home. In the evening the serfs again assembled, and poor Vasily said, "Oh, what kind of people are we anyway? We are only sparrows and not men at all. We agree to stand by each other, but as soon as the time for action comes, we all run and hide. Once a lot of sparrows conspired against a hawk, but no sooner did the bird of prey appear than they sneaked off in the grass. Selecting one of the choicest sparrows, the hawk took it away to eat, after which the others came out crying, 'Twee, twee!' and found that one was missing. 'Who is killed?' they asked. 'Vanka! Well, he deserved it. You, my friends, are acting in just the same manner. When Michael attacked Sidor, you should have stood by your promise. Why didn't you arise, and with one stroke put an end to him and to our misery?' The effect of this speech was to make the peasants more firm in their determination to kill their superintendent. The latter had already given orders that they should be ready to plough during the Easter holidays and to sow the field with oats, whereupon the serfs became stricken with grief and gathered in Vasily's house to hold another indignation meeting. 'If he has really forgotten God,' they said, 'and shall continue to commit such crimes against us, it is truly necessary that we should kill him. If not, let us perish, for it can make no difference to us now.' This despairing program, however, met with considerable opposition from a peaceably inclined man named Peter Mikhaev. 'Brethren,' said he, 'you are contemplating a grievous sin. The taking of human life is a very serious matter. Of course, it is easy to end the mortal existence of a man, but what will become of the souls of those who commit the deed? If Michael continues to act toward us unjustly, God will surely punish him. But, my friends, we must have patience.' This pacific utterance only served to intensify the anger of Vasily. Said he, 'Peter is forever repeating the same old story. It is a sin to kill anyone. Certainly it is sinful to murder, but we should consider the kind of man we are dealing with. We all know it is wrong to kill a good man, but even God would take away the life of such a dog as he is. It is our duty, if we have any love for mankind, to shoot a dog that is mad. It is a sin to let him live. If, therefore, we are to suffer at all, let it be in the interests of the people, and they will thank us for it. If we remain quiet any longer, a flogging will be our only reward.' 'You are talking nonsense, Mikhaev. Why don't you think of the sin we shall be committing if we work during the Easter holidays, for you will refuse to work then yourself?' 'Well then,' replied Peter, 'if they shall send me to plough, I will go, but I shall not be going of my own free will, and God will know whose sin it is, and shall punish the offender accordingly. Yet we must not forget him. Brethren, I am not giving you my own views only. The law of God is not to return evil for evil. Indeed, if you try in this way to stamp out wickedness, it will come upon you all the stronger. It is not difficult for you to kill the man, but his blood will surely stain your own soul. You may think you have killed a bad man, that you have gotten rid of evil, but you will soon find out that the seeds of still greater wickedness have been planted within you. If you yield to misfortune, it will surely come to you.' As Peter was not without sympathizers among the peasants, the poor serfs were consequently divided into two groups: the followers of Vasily and those who held the views of Mikhaev. On Easter Sunday, no work was done. Toward the evening, an elder came to the peasants from the nobleman's court and said, 'Our superintendent, Michael Simeonovitch, orders you to go tomorrow to plough the field for the oats.' Thus the official went through the village and directed the men to prepare for work the next day, some by the river and others by the roadway. The poor people were almost overcome with grief, many of them shedding tears, but none dared to disobey the orders of their master. On the morning of Easter Monday, while the church bells were calling the inhabitants to religious services, and while everyone else was about to enjoy a holiday, the unfortunate serfs started for the field to plough. Michael arose rather late and took a walk about the farm. The domestic servants were through with their work and had dressed themselves for the day, while Michael's wife and their widowed daughter, who was visiting them, as was her custom on holidays, had been to church and returned. A steaming samovar awaited them, and they began to drink tea with Michael, who, after lighting his pipe, called the elder to him. "Well," said the superintendent, "have you ordered the mujiks to plough today?" "Yes, sir, I did," was the reply. "Have they all gone to the field?" "Yes, sir, all of them. I directed them myself where to begin." "That is all very well. You gave the orders, but are they ploughing? Go at once and see, and you may tell them that I shall be there after dinner. I shall expect to find 1½ acres done for every 2 ploughs, and the work must be well done. Otherwise they shall be severely punished, notwithstanding the holiday." "I hear, sir, and obey." The elder started to go, but Michael called him back. After hesitating for some time, as if he felt very uneasy, he said, "By the way, listen to what those scoundrels say about me. Doubtless some of them will curse me, and I want you to report the exact words. I know what villains they are. They don't find work at all pleasant. They would rather lie down all day and do nothing. They would like to eat and drink and make merry on holidays, but they forget that if the ploughing is not done, it will soon be too late. So you go and listen to what is said, and tell it to me in detail. Go at once." "I hear, sir, and obey." Turning his back and mounting his horse, the elder was soon at the field where the serfs were hard at work. It happened that Michael's wife, a very good-hearted woman, overheard the conversation which her husband had just been holding with the elder. Approaching him, she said, "My good friend, Mishinka, diminutive of Michael, I beg of you to consider the importance and solemnity of this holy day. Do not sin for Christ's sake. Let the poor mujiks go home." Michael laughed, but made no reply to his wife's humane request. Finally, he said to her, "You've not been whipped for a very long time, and now you have become bold enough to interfere in affairs that are not your own." "Mishinka," she persisted, "I have had a frightful dream concerning you. You had better let the mujiks go." "Yes," said he, "I perceive that you have gained so much flesh of late that you think you would not feel the whip. Look out." Rudely thrusting his hot pipe against her cheek, Michael chased his wife from the room, after which he ordered his dinner. After eating a hearty meal consisting of cabbage soup, roast pig, meat cake, pastry with milk, jelly, sweet cakes, and vodka, he called his woman cook to him and ordered her to be seated and sing songs, Simeonovitch accompanying her on the guitar. While the superintendent was thus enjoying himself to the fullest satisfaction in the musical society of his cook, the elder returned, and making a low bow to his superior, proceeded to give the desired information concerning the serfs. "Well," asked Michael, "did they plough?" "Yes," replied the elder, "they have accomplished about half the field." "Is there no fault to be found?" "Not that I could discover. The work seems to be well done. They are evidently afraid of you." "How is the soil?" "Very good. It appears to be quite soft." "Well," said Simeonovitch after a pause, "what did they say about me?" "Cursed me, I suppose." As the elder hesitated somewhat, Michael commanded him to speak and tell him the whole truth. "Tell me all," said he. "I want to know their exact words. If you tell me the truth, I shall reward you. But if you conceal anything from me, you will be punished. See here, Catherine, pour out a glass of vodka to give him courage." After drinking to the health of his superior, the elder said to himself, "It is not my fault if they do not praise him. I shall tell him the truth." Then, turning suddenly to the superintendent, he said, "They complain, Michael Semyonovich. They complain bitterly." "But what did they say?" demanded Michael. "Tell me." "Well, one thing they said was, 'He does not believe in God.'" Michael laughed. "Who said that?" he asked. It seemed to be their unanimous opinion. "He has been overcome by the evil one," they said. "Very good," laughed the superintendent, "but tell me what each of them said. What did Vasily say?" The elder did not wish to betray his people, but he had a certain grudge against Vasily, and he said, "He cursed you, more than did any of the others." "But what did he say?" "It is awful to repeat it, sir. Vasily said, 'He shall die like a dog, having no chance to repent.'" "Oh, the villain!" exclaimed Michael. "He would kill me if he were not afraid." "All right, Vasily, we shall have an accounting with you. And Tishka, he called me a dog, I suppose." "Well," said the elder, "they all spoke of you in anything but complimentary terms, but it is mean in me to repeat what they said." "Mean or not, you must tell me, I say." "Some of them declared that your back should be broken." Semyonovich appeared to enjoy this immensely, for he laughed outright. "We shall see whose back will be the first to be broken," said he. "Was that Tishka's opinion?" While I did not suppose they would say anything good about me, I did not expect such curses and threats. And Peter Mikhaev, was that fool cursing me too? "No, he did not curse you at all. He appeared to be the only silent one among them. Mikhaev is a very wise mujik, and he surprises me very much. At his actions all the other peasants seemed amazed." "What did he do?" "He did something remarkable. He was diligently ploughing, and as I approached him, I heard someone singing very sweetly. Looking between the ploughshares, I observed a bright object shining." "Well, what was it? Hurry up!" It was a small 5-kopeck wax candle, burning brightly, and the wind was unable to blow it out. Peter, wearing a new shirt, sang beautiful hymns as he ploughed, and no matter how he handled the implement, the candle continued to burn. In my presence, he fixed the plough, shaking it violently, but the bright little object between the coulters remained undisturbed. "And what did Mikhaev say?" "He said nothing, except when, on seeing me, he gave me the holy day salutation, after which he went on his way singing and ploughing as before. I did not say anything to him, but on approaching the other mujiks, I found that they were laughing and making sport of their silent companion. 'It is a great sin to plough on Easter Monday,' they said. 'You could not get absolution from your sin if you were to pray all your life.'" "And did Mikhaev make no reply?" "He stood long enough to say, 'There should be peace on earth and goodwill to men.'" After which he resumed his ploughing and singing, the candle burning even more brightly than before. Semyonovich had now ceased to ridicule, and putting aside his guitar, his head dropped on his breast, and he became lost in thought. Presently he ordered the elder and cook to depart, after which Michael went behind a screen and threw himself upon the bed. He was sighing and moaning, as if in great distress, when his wife came in and spoke kindly to him. He refused to listen to her, exclaiming, "He has conquered me, and my end is near." "Mishinka," said the woman, "arise and go to the mujiks in the field. Let them go home, and everything will be all right. Heretofore you have run far greater risks without any fear, but now you appear to be very much alarmed." "He has conquered me," he repeated. "I am lost." "What do you mean?" demanded his wife angrily. "If you will go and do as I tell you, there will be no danger. Come, Mishinka," she added tenderly. "I shall have the saddle horse brought for you at once." When the horse arrived, the woman persuaded her husband to mount the animal and to fulfill her request concerning the serfs. When he reached the village, a woman opened the gate for him to enter, and as he did so, the inhabitants, seeing the brutal superintendent whom everybody feared, ran to hide themselves in their houses, gardens, and other secluded places. At length, Michael reached the other gate, which he found closed also, and being unable to open it himself while seated on his horse, he called loudly for assistance. As no one responded to his shouts, he dismounted and opened the gate, but as he was about to remount and had one foot in the stirrup, the horse became frightened at some pigs, and sprang suddenly to one side. The superintendent fell across the fence, and a very sharp picket pierced his stomach, when Michael fell unconscious to the ground. Toward the evening, when the serfs arrived at the village gate, their horses refused to enter. On looking around, the peasants discovered the dead body of their superintendent, lying face downward in a pool of blood, where he had fallen from the fence. Peter Mikhayev alone had sufficient courage to dismount and approach the prostrate form, his companions riding around the village and entering by way of the backyards. Peter closed the dead man's eyes, after which he put the body in a wagon and took it home. When the nobleman learned of the fatal accident which had befallen his superintendent, and of the brutal treatment which he had meted out to those under him, he freed the serfs, exacting a small rent for the use of his land and the other agricultural opportunities. And thus the peasants clearly understood that the power of God is manifested not in evil, but in goodness.